the other. Of course, there are specific issues inside that need now to be settled. We once had the Minsk II agreements, and they were aimed at settling peacefully the conflict in the Donbass. But we even heard from former Chancellor Merkel, oh, we didn't really mean that. We weren't really going to guarantee that. That was bad faith. That was to give Ukraine time to arm. She actually said that a couple of weeks ago. We had agreement for peace, but was it a fake by the US and Ukraine and Germany to rearm? Or was it real? We need something real this time, not something fake. And similarly with Crimea. What Yanukovych was proposing was a long-term lease arrangement for Russia and Ukraine in Crimea, because after all, Russia's had its naval fleet in Sevastopol since 1783. And then every day now Zelensky says, oh, we're going to chase them out of Crimea. Yeah, over all of our dead bodies. Let's stop this nonsense, this childishness. The whole world's survival is at stake. And this rhetoric is so reckless of these leaders, these so-called leaders, these politicians, who think that they, with bravado, that they can say anything, but what they're doing is driving us closer to nuclear war. So we need compromises like the Minsk agreement, like a long-term arrangement for Crimea, and especially for the two nuclear superpowers to back off and stop this reckless NATO enlargement, which was a lie from the beginning, a violation of agreements made to President Gorbachev all the way back in 1990, and hopelessly provocative and dangerous. And that is the key to getting a world back to some protection and some hope for survival. So thank you very much. We need your voices everywhere in every country for governments to stand up clearly at the United Nations and in every other forum to say, stop this war now, stop the escalation, stop the bravado, stop the hate talk, and sit down and negotiate a peace that respects the security interests of all of the parties, and stop the military expansion. This is the root of this war. Thank you very much.
Jeffrey, thank you so much for these highly interesting, but also reminding us to our responsibilities. And I can only say for IPB, with our ceasefire campaign over Christmas, calling for ceasefire, I think we help to bring the question of negotiation and ceasefires much more higher on the agenda of many organizations which were working for peace, international organizations, trade unions, and others. And we will continue with this. We have in mind to have a big negotiation peace conference in Vienna in May, June, to support your ideas and thoughts. But let me ask you two questions. First question is, what do you think is the role of the European Union, but also of the other European countries? And the second question, who are the forces which can internationally or worldwide, which are the governments worldwide, which can help bringing these war-oriented governments to a negotiation table? Are there international governments? Is this India? Is this China? Are we speaking about Turkey? Maybe you can describe a little bit how we can change the forces in the direction of negotiation and ceasefire.
Thank you very much. Let me start with the second question. Most of the world, and I should be more clear, most of the world's governments clearly want peace and are neutral in this conflict between the US and Russia. It's when this war, the war of 2022, exploded in February last year. The US and Europe said, okay, the whole world's aligned against Russian aggression. Well, actually, it wasn't like that. The vast majority of the world's governments said, stop the fighting. We don't take sides. We don't join your sanctions. We don't view this as a one-sided affair. China, for example, very responsibly said, negotiate, but respect the security interests of all sides. What that meant was the NATO question. And around the world, most governments did not impose sanctions on Russia. They said, we want an end to the war. We are neither Russia haters nor Ukraine haters. We want the two sides to negotiate. So practically speaking, China, Brazil, India, South Africa, the so-called BRICS countries, together with Russia, those countries are major voices for peace and negotiation, and they should continue to say very clearly that their vision is not to side with one side or the other side, but to side with negotiation and peace. And India has a special role to play. Not only is it a great country and a civilization and 1.4 billion people, but it's the presidency of the G20 this year. And so India has plenty of opportunity to push hard for peace and negotiations. Brazil will host the G20 next year. President Lula is very clear that what is needed right now is not military victory on the battlefield. This is a reckless illusion. What is needed is negotiations and an end to the NATO enlargement. And Brazil will be president of the G20 next year. South Africa, which has said the same, will be president of the G20 in 2025. So I believe that these countries have a huge role to play. I think the African Union should make a strong statement that Africa is being endangered by this war. Africa views this war as a tragedy and an unnecessary one, and as a solvable one as well. So the African Union, I believe, should stand up and be clear. This is the time for peace and for negotiations. Turkey, in my mind, gets a special commendation because President Erdogan has worked very hard during the past year, and his very skillful foreign ministry has worked hard to try to mediate between the two sides.